Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Now, are you sitting at home having your head radiated? Have you been asked by your electric company to have a smart meter? One of those lovely smart, it's got a bow tie, it looks very nice, it's just hanging there in your hallway, radiating away with its Wi-Fi, vroom, vroom, doing all that kind of stuff. Are you being forced, coerced? Are you being told you've got to have one of these damn things, whether you like it or not, whether you're sensitive to the radiations? And why couldn't they just keep the old-fashioned little wheelie thing goes round that's been here since the year dot? What's wrong with it? Why have we got to upgrade to everything? I've got a man on the line who knows all the reasons, whether it's good, helpful, or whether it's actually going to damage us. He is, of course, Stan O'Donnell. O'Donnell? McDonald. I beg your pardon, Stan. He's gonna belt me one now. Hello, Stan.
Hello, Richard. It's good to be here.
It's nice to have you back. It's lovely to see our previous video on the council tax has had quite a good following, and it's great to have you back again, following it straight up with something that has been on a lot of people's minds. And I've had emails about this from people going, oh, my electric company, they're saying I've got to have one of these smart meters, I've got to do something. What can I do? Is there any pushback? And we know that these things are not actually as healthy as everybody says.
Exactly. And it gives them the ultimate control. They can shut your electricity off with a flip of a few keys on a keyboard and sends a signal down and shuts your power down.
And that's not good. That's not good for it. Now, before we get into that, and you've put together this wonderful presentation, I have got to just quickly do a quick plug, I'm afraid to say, for some bald bloke. Here he is. The old Richard Vobes with Sovereign Pete, one of my other guests that I have on the show. If you haven't got tickets, there's a few tickets left, I've been told, at the Attic in Southampton. Come and see Sovereign Pete. I'm interviewing him on stage. Your questions, ask him whatever you damn well like. You might want to ask him about smart meters, but we're going to give you all the answers to that now, so ask him other questions. That's this Saturday, 13th of April, 2024, of course, in Southampton. I will put the link in the description, and I will see you there. Meanwhile, back to today's show, and good old Stan is here with an amazing presentation. Stan, over to you, sir.
Yes, in fact, like I was saying just before the plug, if you call it that.
Yeah, the commercial break.
I dealt with the local Ontario Hydro. Okay, Ontario Hydro has been divided into two different divisions. There's Ontario Power Generation and Ontario Hydro. Ontario Hydro, or now it's called Hydro One, is actually the supplier. And I actually went at odds with these people, and I proved all kinds of stuff. And I'm only going to touch on basic little pieces of it here and there. What I did with the documents, which we're going to reference later, I actually sent them down to the White House by courier. Yes, because what they had done in the States, and probably everywhere else for that matter, is they were implementing Chinese technology, because China manufactures most of the stuff we use. And I sent a letter down to the White House and told Trump at that time that, this might have backdoors to it and everything else. And so the government, at least in the United States, is aware. And I developed a package. It was 900 and some pages. So it was, coil bound, thick, massive thing. And so I make a statement and I gave the proof, make a statement and give the proof. Those documents are, as we'll uncover later, actually available for anybody that wanted to do or take similar action. And I wrote letters that were kind of tailored to what they were for, because you may be at work and you may be getting exposed to Wi-Fi. So you'd have a letter for your employer, or if your child's at school, there would be a letter for that purpose. And all the backup and supporting evidence is there. If somebody said, well, why don't you make it into a book? Well, in essence, I did. It's a PDF book, and it's available on a Facebook group, which we'll get into later, called Smart Meter Litigation.
Smart Meter Litigation. Brilliant. Okay, well, we can stick the link in the description, and people can spend the week going through 990-odd pages of that, which sounds grand. And thank you for doing that. So we've got 999 slides to get through.
No, no.
No.
I got to keep it within an hour or close to an hour.
Yeah.
And there is so much information. So I'm just going to briefly touch on some of the key points that some of which are in that book, some of which are not. And people are free to use that information, pass it around, do whatever you want to do with it. And
Well,
a
that's very
couple a couple
generous.
of lawyers looked at it and they said, "Holy crap, what's your intent with this?" And my intent is to raise awareness, and that's one of
Yeah.
the reasons I like your platform, because we are raising awareness, and then people are free to, take it for what it is. And
Yeah.
you at least what I do, I show you where the information is, and then you
Yes.
can go read it for yourself and you draw your own conclusions. You don't
Absolutely.
have to agree with us on everything. The point is, here it is. Take it for what you can glean out of it.
And
You
for
know?
the purposes of what we sort of do in these cases is to say this is not legal
Yeah,
information. You do your own due diligence and all that. People know that now, and hopefully they don't just sort of go away and take a tiny piece of it and go off and do something and then get themselves into hot water. So make sure you fully understand. Having said that, shall we get on to smart meters or not so smart?
exactly. Now, what's depicted here is what looks like a smart meter, and this would be fairly similar to what you would see in North America. And people have
Right.
asked me, well, how do I know if it's a smart meter? Well, if you notice on that one, it has a digital display, and there's nothing that looks like it's mechanical. Therefore,
Right.
it is in fact a smart meter. And one of the biggest companies that make those smart meters they're used in North America is a company called Landis and Gear. So if you see Landis and Gear on the side of it, it's probably a smart meter.
Right. And we've got all sorts of different shapes and sizes in this country these days. I mean, because I suppose lots of people are making these things.
Right. And the thing is that a smart meter is not necessarily only restricted to electricity. They have smart meters now for water consumption. They also have a smart meter for natural gas consumption.
Right.
And as we go through, I'm going to show you what the problem is with it. So if we
Yeah.
go to the next slide, Richard, this is the basic depiction of what's in a smart meter. And you'll see there's a power supply.
Yes.
Something is going to have to give that supply power. So you're paying to run this electric meter. And then there's a DB connection or a smart meter, whichever. And because they are smart reader, they can transmit a signal to that smart meter and they can shut it down. In fact, I was the victim of that when I put in a fight for the against the smart meter, and Ontario Hydro disconnected my power for about 6 months. And ultimately they won because there's nothing I can do about it. But at that
Right.
time I said, this is what's going to build. Okay, now you've ticked me off. Now I'm going to go get the evidence.
Yeah.
Okay.
Quite.
And
Quite right.
if you see there, it says relay. Now, for those of you
Relay.
for those that don't know, a relay is basically an electronic switch. And people have asked me, well, can they actually shut that meter off remotely? Yes, because that relay is in there. Now, you tell me on the planet, who would build a meter that would require a relay if you want consistent power to be measured all the time? So the relay is in there so they can shut your power off. Now, I was informed, and I don't know if this is 100% correct, but due to a certain, let's say, medical intervention that people had, I was told that in the UK, in the near future, if you don't cooperate with them with their medical intervention, that they will potentially shut your electricity off. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. Okay, but
But
if you can't,
even if it's a vague possibility, that would put the wind up a
yeah,
lot of people.
and if you remember back, I don't know, 10, 12 months ago in the UK, we were having power outages.
Hmm.
And then, how did the whole grid go down and then the whole grid came back up? And when it did, because there's a power surge, because everything's drawing current at the same time to try and start up, a lot of devices got burned out. People's refrigerators, computers, laptops, Xboxes, whatever, burned up. And I remember talking to the modem supplier for the internet, which is fiber optic. And he said, you're not the first person. He said, you won't be the last. In fact, I think he said there was over 300 modems that got fried. And the reason is that when right now the current is running, certain things start, certain things stop because people turn off and on different devices. But when you
Yes.
shut everything down and everything was running and you turn everything on all at once, when they reclose the contact, there's a big power draw because everything, when it first starts to get moving, has inrush current. Well, that causes the grid to have voltage fluctuations.
Oh, I
That's,
see. That's why
yeah,
you could. Yeah.
yeah, because it can't supply the current and everything's fighting to get back online. And people have reported to me that these smart meters, because of the dirty electricity, which we'll get into, also shortens the life of your appliances. So, yeah, you asked the question, are these things safe? No.
No.
That's only one problem. And if that was the only problem, then okay, we could deal with it. And then if you notice there, it says LCD. That's liquid crystal display. That's the thing I showed you on the first screen. And I said there's a digital display. That's what that
Yeah.
LCD is, liquid
Right.
crystal display. So if we go on to the next slide, Richard.
Certainly.
Okay, some people have said, oh, I don't know what a smart meter looks like. So if you look at the left-hand side there, you're going to see a square, that black square meter. You notice there's analog numbers in there, and there's a little chrome wheel. It's actually an aluminum wheel. And then underneath it, you'll see what's in North America. And again, it has that metal wheel. It's an aluminum wheel. Those are the mechanical meters, or analog meters, as we call them. And then on the opposite side, I have the little square meter at the top. That would be similar to what the UK people would use for electricity, or potentially something else, but that one's electricity. And then underneath it, you'll see the similar meter to that was showed on the initial screen, and that would be a smart meter that would be used in North America. Canada and the States are pretty much using the same meters.
Right.
So now we can differentiate, well, what do I have a smart meter? Don't I have a smart meter? And believe it or not, there is no obligation for you to get a smart meter. A lot of people have said to me, well, Measurement Canada, in our case, depicted that we have to change out the meters. And in actual fact, I wrote a letter to Measurement Canada and asked them if this was true, and they said no. As long as the base of your meter, where it couples together, is not leaking or cracked or anything, those older analog meters don't expire.
Wow. Well, let's hope that's the case in the UK, because there's a lot of people.
It is. I already confirmed it. So when they
Fantastic.
tell you, yeah, they actually, Measurement Canada told me, and so did the UK electrical people, they said it's done at the supplier level, which is
Right.
actually incorrect. It's actually the not the supplier, because the supplier is just the electrical generation outfit, but it's actually the billing authority. So to correct their own mistake, it was the building authority that regulates that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, now if we look at this slide here, I don't know if Richard can blow that up for us, but you're going to see in here there's different tolerances. This is a slide, and it shows what the RF exposure safety limits are. And you're going to, if you can look at that, I don't know how clear that comes through, but it tells you the different exposure rates and what they're supposed to be safe. Well, there's no clear consensus as to what is classified as safe. And in fact, when they do these tests, okay, this is going to shock your viewers. When they do these so-called alleged tests, they do the test for 6 minutes. That's one of their tests, and the other one is something like 6 seconds to see what the long-term effects of RF exposure are.
So
Well,
your long-term effects of the exposure to a smart meter is tested for 6 minutes.
yes. Now you tell me, if you put a roast in the microwave oven for 6 minutes, is it cooked?
No.
Could you tell in 6 minutes that thing had been microwaved? If I put a roast in the microwave and I put it in there for 6 minutes, and I pull it out and set it on the counter, and I say, Richard, did we warm that up or not? Would you ever be able to tell? No.
No.
So their
No.
testing is complete bogus.
Yeah.
Therein lies my point. Now, one thing I didn't put in this slide, because I just can't find it actually in my collection of stuff here, but the RF exposure is actually classified as a class 2B carcinogenic. And what that means is it's equivalent to lead or asbestos.
Wow.
So if that's the case, why are we being exposed to this stuff? And the simple reason is profit. Because the power company, the gas company, and whatever, they don't want to have to employ a meter reader and send them out in a vehicle to go register and check your supply to be able to give you a proper meter reading. So that's the whole purpose. It's clear profit and total control, because as I showed you, there is a relay in there, and they can just, we don't like what this person did, click, and within a few seconds,
it's all that control.
Yeah, total dominance and control. Now, some people have said, well, how do we know how much exposure we're being exposed to? So what I've depicted here is a screen capture from Amazon.
Right.
And well, if you notice that meter, it's a Tri-Field 2 meter, and it's not the cheapest meter, and it's not definitely not the best meter, but it is one that's commonly used. And so if people want to know what their RF exposure is, there's the way to do it. Now, one of the things I want to bring up that many people will say, well, yeah, they say it's safe as a cell phone. Well, as we're going to find out, cell phones aren't safe. But the other thing is, maybe the smart meter transmission, let's hypothetically, and I'm not saying this is true, but let's hypothetically say, well, yeah, it is safe. Well, that's with exposure to one smart meter. Now, what we know is there's a mesh, what's called a mesh network, and let's just say Richard Vobes, we'll pick on him, he's a good target. Let's say he lives on a street, and there's how many houses on your street, Richard? Approximately.
So, yeah, I'm in a parade of terraced houses. There's probably 20 in a line, and then bang opposite me, there'll be another 20 on the other side of the road.
Okay, so you have now 40 houses that are transmitting this RF signal. If one was safe, right?
Yeah.
And now we got 40 of them. Now here's the problem too with this mesh network. Sometimes a meter is in the wrong location. It can't get a direct signal to the cell tower.
Right.
It is a tree in the way, a mountain, who knows. So what they do is they'll take, say, house number 1, where we have 40 houses. So it'll take house number 1 and it'll transmit its data to house number 2. So house number 2 now stores the data for house number 2, because that's what its metering base is, and it stores the data for house number 1. Well, maybe house number 2 can't get that information direct out either, so it may forward it to house number 3, and house number 4, and house number 5, and maybe by the time it gets to house number 20, now it can get a signal out, and it'll send the signal out. So your meter, even though they tell you, well, it only transmits a few times a day, that's a load of malarkey. Okay, that's the biggest load of garbage you've ever seen, because those meters are always talking to the other meters. And so what a lot of people do that are bothered with this RF is they say, we don't want to be part of this mesh network. You know, bypass us and just have our meters send the data out for our own specific place. You can request that.
You can.
You can. Now, whether or not they'll do it, that's another story. And sometimes they tell you that they will update the meter or they will change the meter, and they in fact don't.
No. How would you know?
You would never know. Now, some people have advocated, okay, well, I know what I'll do with this thing. And what they do is they remove the meter because it's causing them, medical issues.
Yeah.
And some people say,
are sensitive.
And they say, well, I have the right to remove the meter. And the actual fact of the matter is you don't have the right to remove that meter. Now, there's certain provisions under the Electricity Act in every state, province, or country that if you turn on and bypass the meter and put your own meter in there, you will get a visit from somebody you don't want to. And they will try to charge you for stealing electricity. And I do actually know of a lady, and not to give details too much, but she was down in South Carolina, and she contacted the smart meter, the people at Palmetto Electric. I don't care if they know who it is. It's an actual court case. It's public record. And so she contacted Palmetto Electric and said, look, this is bothering me. And I wasn't having medical issues until that meter was put in. And by using the Tri-Field meter that we showed you, she was able to determine that this meter is telling us that it's talking to the cell tower almost nonstop. And that's typical of a lot of these smart meters. And so she did what's called a notarial protest, or a 3-letter process, right?
Yeah.
Which is similar to what's been covered by other people on different platforms. And so typically under that system, you would send a letter out, and then you give them time to respond, 10 days, 15 days, 30 days, 21 days, whatever. And then you give them a notice to default, giving them a chance to correct their mistake due to the lack of response. And then what she did was she served them a notice, a notice of fault and opportunity to cure, and then a notice of default, which was the 3rd letter. And when that happened, she said, okay, they're not going to do squat. So what she did was she had the meter removed, and she put in her own analog meter. Now, the problem with doing this is these digital meters have a special network number, okay, node number, call it whatever you will, special ID. and it's supposed to communicate with the cell tower. So what she did before removing the meter is she took a picture of those digital displays when it was on the front of the thing, and it comes up with 3 or 4 screens, whatever it is, and she took pictures of it, recorded the numbers in writing, sent copies of the photographs, packed the whole thing up, and sent it back to the building authority. And immediately she felt better. Now, 3 or 4 days later, when those meters did not report in because they're not hooked up anymore, they came out and they actually charged her for stealing electricity. And she got a criminal record because of it.
Mm-hmm.
So people that figure, oh, well, I'll just go buy another meter and throw it in there, probably not a good idea. And when she came to me finally, she was in the appeals process, and I worked with her, and I said, this is what you can file in as an appeal. And it was a major amount of paperwork condensed down to, I don't know what it was, 60 pages. And so part of that information is now contained in the book that I made reference to earlier.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, so just going out and replacing the smart meter is probably not the best idea. But here's the issue, too, and we'll get into this. But when they disconnect that meter and they replace it with the new meter, I'll get more into this later, they actually do it incorrectly, and they compromise not only the meter, but the meter base. Now, you as the consumer are responsible for everything, like the box the meter plugs in, that's your responsibility. The conduit, the cables, all that's your problem. The meter belongs to the utility company. So if you turn around and take their meter away, now you're not metering the electricity, and you've tampered with something that's not yours.
Right.
So as much as I agree that maybe it shouldn't be there, removing it's going to cause you a problem.
So could you just take a fuse out the fuse box that's on that ring that that meter happens to be on?
Well, I don't think anybody uses fuses anymore, but the problem is the fuse, as you call it, or breaker, as we would call it nowadays, is on your side of the meter. So if you shut the meter off, then potentially, yeah, you're shutting off part of the problem. And I say part of the problem because in Canada and in North America, we have a funny system. Our electricity comes in two separate voltages. There's a white wire to a black wire, which is 120 volts. And there's 2 black wires, and between those two, you have 240 volts. When you shut off the main supply, you're shutting off the 2 black wires. The white wire is still connected.
Right.
Right. Now, in the UK, you guys don't have the 120 volts. Everything you deal with is 240 volts.
Yeah.
So when you deal with it, it would shut off the whole supply. The problem with shutting the meters off, or the breaker off at nighttime, is that breaker, every time you trip that breaker to shut it off, you're actually weakening the strength of that breaker. And so eventually you're going to wear out that breaker and you're going to have to replace it. Now, if that's a main supply breaker, the only way to do it literally is to disconnect the live wires from the box and replace the breaker. So you may be causing yourself some problems down the line.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I mean, some of the fuses you can actually pull out.
Right. That gets into another problem because there's current flowing in that circuit. Okay. And this is the same problem that happens when they pull the meter from your meter base. Electricity will always try to continue to flow. It'll jump a gap. I mean, if those that don't believe me, just go look at a spark plug. How does a spark plug work? The ground and the center prong, and the thing jumps across and it ignites your fuel. Well, your air fuel mixture. Anyway, so when you pull that plug or unscrew the fuse, as it were, in some cases, or unplug the meter, the electricity is going to try and jump the gap. So it's going to arc the little bit on the contacts and a little bit on the meter base. And I don't care. They screwed their own meter. Who cares? And then they plug a new meter in. They've now compromised it twice.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that. So just unplugging the breakers is not a good idea. In fact, I had a friend of mine that had screw-in fuses, and he used to do that at nighttime. He'd unscrew the fuse, and he basically screwed his entire electrical box up. And he came to me and said, "This thing doesn't work." And what the heck did you do to the fuse? Because underneath there's a copper strip, and it's all arced out. He said, "Well, that's how I shut off my water pump." I went, "Holy crap, okay." So I re-rigged it and put a switch in there. I said, "There, now you got a proper switch." Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't advocate pulling the breakers or fuses. So that's what the meter looks like. Now, this is an interesting thing. A friend of mine down in the States, where the heck's he from? Don't remember, Tennessee. Anyway, he was trying to prove that the smart meter is radiated. So he
Right.
got a meter from Gigahertz Solutions. That's who makes this specific meter. And it's called an HF59D. Now, this is the RF from one cell tower that was a repeater tower. Okay? And the repeater tower was illegally, unlawfully placed on his property without his consent, without his knowledge. And
Huh.
if you look on that meter, on that reading, that thing sort of looks like an S. It's kind of sloppy because it's got all this ups and downs, ups and downs. That is the harmonics and the garbage that's transmitted from this tower that's in his property. And on this property, it was like a campground where people lived, okay? It was a common living spot. And they had this meter, and there was at least 6 or 8 people that experienced huge problems, medical problems. And some people died. And this thing actually went to court. And this was this harmonics that they're transmitting. If you notice it, it is sort of like an S pattern, but you see it's all up and down. That's all, junk that doesn't belong there. And that's not good for you. And that's from one tower. Well, if you look at the map, and I gave Richard a map of all the cell towers in the UK, right? I sent it to him by email.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at that, or if you look in Canada or the States or whatever, you're going to find out there's pretty much no place you can go that there's not some blasted cell tower transmitting something somewhere.
Yes.
And they don't shut down at nighttime. They're going nonstop because somebody may have to make a phone call at any one given point in time, right? We don't know when people got to make a phone call.
No, quite.
And everybody now is carrying around the radiation device called a cell phone, and they're always talking to the tower. So you're exposing yourself to the transmissions from at least one tower at any one given point in time.
Which probably explains why I was ill fairly recently, because the body was probably a bit overwhelmed with all this damn radiation.
Yeah, well, there is a number of things that people feel: nausea, and some people have changed their blood pressure and everything else.
Yeah.
So it gets quite in depth, far beyond what we can cover today. But anyway, for those that want to actually measure it, now what this guy did with this HF59D is he recorded. He had a Holter monitor, which is a heart monitor, connected to himself, and he kept a diary. And he used this HF59D, and he kept a log of when he felt bad. And anytime he felt bad, it correlated to when this tower thing was transmitting. And so he used this as a medical argument, and he, went to court, and it took a few years, and he was able to prove his case.
And did they remove the tower from his land?
Yes,
they did.
It took, I think, about 6 years to get the whole thing done, but it caused some other problems for his wife, and because she had false teeth, and they were basically screwed into her jaw, and the vibrations from this power actually vibrated that stuff loose.
Cool. Straight.
So now, if we look at that previous signal, you saw it looked like an F, and there's a bunch of spikes on it. The same thing happens when inside the smart meter, there's what's called a switch mode power supply. And because they're too cheap when they manufacture stuff, and they want to do it as cheaply as possible, they use a switch mode power supply. Now, what I've depicted here is a screenshot of what's called an oscilloscope. Okay?
Yes.
That S pattern is your 60 cycle or 50 cycle sine wave. That's what your power line should look like.
60 cycle sine wave, yeah.
A 60 cycle, or you guys in the UK are 50 cycle.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It's the same thing.
Same thing, yeah.
Yeah, you notice there's no major garbage stuck on that sine wave.
No.
Okay, now let's go to the next screen. That is what's on your existing power line, and this is a 60 cycle. This was from a school, if I remember correctly. Now, I've blown parts of this up so we can see it. Now, Richard, if you could zoom in on the left-hand side.
Yeah, bear with me.
That chart with all those numbers are in a row.
Okay.
No, the other side. There you go. Now, look at those numbers, Richard. Go to the top of the screen, or the top row of the. Okay,
yeah.
Look at the numbers there. It's got two sets of numbers. Notice there's a blue set of numbers and a red set of numbers.
It looks like 162.00, and then adjacent to that in red is 227.00.
Right. Now, if we're measuring a 120 volt circuit, okay, that's what we're measuring here. 120 volt circuit. Now, under the electricity standards, under the IEEE, and this goes for you guys in the UK as well, and the States and Australia, because IEEE is international. That's what the I stands for. Now, if we're measuring 120 volts, we're given a tolerance of plus 5%. So what's 120 volts plus 5%, Richard?
120 volts plus 5%. I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah. What? Not much.
10% would be 12 volts. 5%
Right. So
is 6
six.
volts.
So 620. So 130 tops.
126, 130 volts. Now, what did you say those numbers were, Richard?
163 on the one and 227 on the red.
So, do you think if you gave something 163 volts or, higher, do you think that's going to do your electrical appliance any good?
Probably not.
Exactly. Probably not is right, because when you increase the voltage in any circuit, it's going to draw more current, because voltage, if you want to look at it this way, is push. So
Yeah.
the stronger the push, the more voltage is going to go through. Now, you'll notice that sine wave is a lot higher voltage. And you'll notice that on the red side, look at the spikes there. Look what the voltage is over there. Right? You said there's 100 and I don't remember what it says, but
227 on the red.
so you're giving a 120 volt circuit 227 volts. Do you think that's a good idea?
No.
No. And so there's your problem. See, people have asked me, well, prove that the smart meter causes this. Well, there's your proof. That's from I didn't depict that. That came off an actual measuring device, spectrum analyzer. And this was in a school. Now,
That's in a school, yeah.
It's in a school, yeah. So if we go to the next screen. Okay, now this actually depicts an RF signal or signal on a radio broadcast. So if we take a look at it, see it says audio signal, right?
Yeah, top one.
And then, so if you go to a radio station, and let's assume the radio station is tuned into something, there's music playing, right? That's the audio signal. That's the top line. Now, the radio station itself has a certain frequency, 800 AM on their AM band or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
That's the carrier frequency. So when we get the two of them together, we get what's called a modulated circuit. Amplitude modulation is AM. So they take a signal and another signal and they put it together. There you go. Now, when we go back to that other slide, which comes up later, that other stuff should not be there. It's supposed to look like that nice clean sine wave we showed on the oscilloscope.
Oh, yeah.
So with all that extra garbage in there, your electronic devices are not designed to deal with that stuff. So it causes premature failing of electronic devices. And that could be your television, could be your computer, could be anything.
Yes.
Right? Because it's not made for to take that extra stuff. And the problem is that switch mode power supplies are not only in the smart meter, but because they're making everything more compact, smaller, and everything else, they don't want to put in a great big transformer, because that's coil, copper's a wire, it's fairly expensive. They use the cheap switch mode power supply that they can build for literally pennies on the dollar in comparison.
Oh, I see. So
this causes this problem.
So it's the big old transformers are filtering out all the noise that you don't want.
Yeah, or some of it, a good portion.
Or some of it. Yeah.
Now, some people have asked me, so, well, that's okay. I have my own transformer, or I have an analog meter. I don't have a smart meter. Well, the problem is that the dirty electricity, that's what we'll call it, is connected to, your house is probably connected to a transformer to get power. And in most cases, it's 3 houses are connected to one transformer because they don't want to put a transformer at every house, right? Obviously, it's costing the utility company too much money. So the problem is that your neighbor's doing the good neighbor thing, and they're transmitting their garbage through their smart meter and their electronic devices into the transformer, who then transmits some of that dirty electricity back to you.
Charming.
Share with the neighbor policy.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to build a filter to get rid of this stuff. And I've done that. I built a filter that actually removes a good portion of that.
Oh, right. Okay. Didn't know you could do that.
Yeah. So if we go to the next slide, then there's the same signal I said it would come back. So instead of getting the nice clean sine wave, we get all that red harmonic stuff. That's from the switching mode power supply. And if you actually measure on the other screen that you were going to go to before, that's on the opposite side, it actually tells you what those voltages are, but we've already got that, so we're good. So if we go to the next slide, There it is there, see? And it shows you, and it tells you exactly. So it's not my interpretation or Richard's ability to read the chart. On the
Yeah.
one side, you look what it says for the voltage there, Richard.
I'm just trying to make out. It's a little bit
Maybe
blurred.
maybe you can blow it up. I don't know if it'll blow it up or not.
Um, Name date. Where's the voltage? Where are we looking?
Ah,
5027.
look, measurements. Where it says measurements above the bottom box.
Oh yeah, measurements. It's got 171.28, I think, volts, and
Yep,
minimum. So maximum and minimum, 172.
yep. I think that's over the 156 volts we were allowed, wasn't it? And look at the other side. It can't even measure it. Overloaded, it says, or something like that.
Overloaded. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because it's not made to measure it. It will do it, but it won't bring it up on the chart because we give it the threshold, what the voltage it should be.
Right. Gosh.
So, if anybody doesn't believe it, just go take a 6-volt light bulb and connect it to 12 volts, 12-volt car battery, and it'll blow up,
Yes.
right? Well, you're doing the same thing with this. The reason it doesn't happen or doesn't do it is because there's not much current involved in it, but it does create a problem in all your circuits.
Right. Yeah. So another reason for not having one of these damn things.
Exactly. Now, this here depicts typical wiring diagram. Now, if you notice, I've highlighted the one little circuit there, a little circle. That's
Yeah.
number 14 wire. Now, in North America, we use 14.3 to wire our houses. Okay. Now, if we take a good look at that thing, you'll notice it's got a certain frequency that it's available to work. It just goes straight across. And what happens is the frequency that it's rated to handle, okay?
See if I can blow it up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I did the best I could on my side, but it comes out a little different on your end. Now, if we look at the frequency available, look over here where it says kilohertz, right? Or hertz in this case, HZ. Okay? What does it say under hertz?
Under hertz. Hang on. I'm just trying to
Right,
find where.
yeah, it's the second column in from the left-hand end.
Oh, second column
Or
from the
right-hand end, sorry. Whatever. It's on the end there, right there.
Oh yeah. Sorry. I'm just being a bit thick.
That's all right.
Which is it's okay. So hertz is 109. No, 6,700.
Yeah. So, but the problem is that these switch mode power supplies work at 10 kilohertz or above. So the wire is not rated in your house to handle that harmonic.
Oh right.
So,
Bloody hell.
so that's the equivalent to me saying, "Hey, Richard, we're going to fill up this, I don't know, Coke bottle with some water. You hang on to a funnel. You hang on to that. I'll go come back. I'll bring some water, okay?" So Richard's like, "Yeah, okay." And he grabs a hold of the funnel and then jams it in the bottle. And I come back with a front end loader, okay, full of water in the bucket. And they say, "Okay, collect all the water, Richard." And I dump the bucket, and the bucket's 7 feet wide.
Right.
What happens to the water? Some of it'll go down the funnel, and the rest of it radiates out beside the wires.
Yeah. Everywhere else.
And so people, guys, I feel bad. I feel ill in my living room or my back den, or I can't sleep. Yeah, because the wiring in your building is not rated to handle that frequency, so it tries to displace it.
So it's just in the atmosphere, as it were.
Exactly. And that RF meter we showed, that tri-field meter, it will detect that for you.
Right. Gosh. Okay.
Yeah. So we can prove it. Now, I talk about the switch mode power supply, and if you wanted to read that whole thing, but okay. Now, underneath the red part, it says that causes dirty electricity, okay? And it lists a few other things that happen, right?
Yeah.
It causes harmonics, and that harmonics is what we talked about, power distortion. And it also says underneath the very last word there, it affects power factor.
Power factor.
Now, what the heck is power factor? So we're going to show you what power factor is.
Okay.
Okay? If you wanted to read that, you could, but there you go. Now, if you look at this picture, you're going to notice on the one side, you notice there's two sine waves, because we're dealing with 50 or 60 cycles. And there's a red one and a blue one, and one's directly on top of the other.
Yeah.
So in this case, we have a power factor that's perfect. In other words, voltage and current are working together. Okay? Voltage and current are working together, so we have a perfect power factor. When we use the switch mode power supply, due to the harmonics and the way the stupid thing works, you'll notice the picture on the other side, the voltage and the current are out of phase.
Out of phase.
Yeah, they're shifted.
Yes.
Okay. And so what happens if you have a power factor that's not perfect? Your utility company bills you for having improper power factor, and more so if you're commercial. Okay. Commercial people that like, and what causes a screw up in power factor is a coil, right?
Yeah.
A coil or a capacitor can be used to phase shift voltage and current, in phase, out of phase. Okay, simple enough. Now, what's inside a switch mode power supply is, in fact, a coil. What's inside your LCD light bulb? Because it's a power supply, what do? They put a little coil in there. So what this does, all these smart lights, LED, compact fluorescence, all that, what they're doing is they're screwing up the power factor.
Oh, I
Yes,
see.
they may draw less current, but what they did was they totally screwed around with your utility, with your power. And so you have all this harmonics and phase shifting and everything else. And it becomes reactive power and reflective power. I'm not going to get into that because that's too complicated. But
Yeah.
what that does is it causes you to actually consume more electricity. You may consume less from the specific circuit, but everything else in the house is drawing more current because voltage and current should be in phase.
Oh, I see.
So
Right.
the more smart devices you have in your home, the dumber you are.
Great.
There you go. That's what happens. Now, when you have the switch mode power supply, this is a sine wave off an oscilloscope, and you're going to see what they do is the voltage charges up and then discharges. It's off center a little bit, but it doesn't matter. The point is, the power comes up and then it drops out, and then they ramp it up and down. So does that look like a sine wave to you, Richard?
No, not your
No.
beautiful, lovely up and down hill-shaped sine wave. No.
Right. So this is equivalent to me having Richard drive down the road at 100 miles an hour. At the end of the road, we don't tell him this, but there's a cement wall.
A cement wall.
And so when he hits the wall, if you notice there's a spike there before it drops out, right?
Yes.
This is what's causing those red lines on that harmonic screen we had earlier. Because it's every couple of seconds, bang, 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 bang. Because it's chopping the power line, the power voltage. So the average RMS power voltage is not the 120 volts or whatever it is that's coming in. It might be 240. It might be dropped down to 5, 10, 12 volts. So these power spikes, they have to go somewhere. So when Richard's car hits the cement wall, it's immovable at 100 miles an hour, right? What happens to his car? The front end compacts and the back end comes up and he basically goes forward. Well, the voltage does the same thing and it has to go somewhere, so it causes a power spike.
Oh, I see. Right. Which can't be healthy.
No, it isn't. There's your dirty electricity. And it happens at 10, 12, or I'm sorry, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 kilohertz. Now, if you remember from our other chart, we were only supposed to be at 9,000 and something. We're already over the limit. So this garbage is now radiating out of the wires.
Gosh.
And then some people, they get the idea that, oh, I know what I'll do. I want to get rid of this wireless stuff. So I'm going to put in a booster and I'll plug this box in, and then I'll plug my router into the box, and I'll use as my power line for transmitting my signals, right? Because then I can get wireless at the other end of the house or something by plugging something else into another repeater box, right? Well, you're putting those signals now on your power grid. You're adding to the problem. Yeah. So that's not good either. Again, your power lines aren't rated for that.
Okay.
So let's go on to the next slide. Okay, that's the same thing we depicted. We can bypass that one. This is what's in a typical AC to DC switch mode power supply, and this one drops it off to 24 volts. Right? That's what they use instead of a big transformer. And you notice those big heat sinks, those big aluminum things with the fins on them, those are heat sinks to dissipate heat, because what happens to all this energy that's not being used? Has to dissipate it somewhere, so it dissipates it as heat, and those big heat sinks are dissipating heat based on the fact that of all those spikes.
Right. And is that safe?
No. I mean, it's safe as far as it's not going to burn anything. That's why the heat sink's there.
Yeah.
But the harmonics that come off it is not good, no.
No. Okay. No. So, right. We're in a bit of a pickle here, aren't we?
You got it. No, next. Okay. Now what I did, I told you I built a filter. So my filter, you see there's voltage and current basically, and they're more or less in phase. Now, if you notice on the one side of the screen, it says harmonic,
Yeah.
first harmonic, second harmonic. When you have a signal, let's just pick on 50 cycles because it's easy to work with. So 50 cycle is the first harmonic. 100 cycle would be the second harmonic, because you're doubling it.
Yeah.
So the
Okay.
third time would be 150. When you have a harmonic, which is all these, bad frequencies, as long as that frequency is somewhere between the first harmonic and the 16th harmonic, it still has enough power to do something. Each time you get a second or third or fourth or fifth harmonic, the signal is less strong or but it's still there. And so when we deal with circuits, we want to filter out the first harmonic and is allowed, and then everything second, third, fourth, fifth, they're supposed to be filtered out. And they don't put any filtering in those smart meters.
They did.
None.
Right. None.
So what I did is I built a filter and it sort of, puts it back in where it belongs. So now you're getting closer to the 60 cycle.
Yes.
Right?
Okay.
And you just wire this thing into your house, and once it's wired up, I provide it with a plug, and you basically get electrician to put the plug in, you plug this filter in, and that's the end of it. It filters out most of it.
And are these sort of filters commercially available? Can you buy them somewhere?
Not the way I'm doing it. No, I actually compared what I did to the other commercial circuits. There is two companies that do produce filters. One of them is called Green Wave, and the other one is Stetzer filter. But when I built my filter, I actually compared my results to other people's results, and I did a better job.
Well done, you.
Because they were trying to cut corners and do it as cheap as possible.
Right. Which is always the case.
Always the case. I don't work that way. I say I want to do it as best I can, within a reasonable cost factor. So, next slide. Okay. And there you see, I just did this for comparison. You see the mess that they had, and then you see what I have.
Yeah,
right?
Nice and smooth.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's better. Now, I talked about when you unplug the meter, it causes an arcing. Now, if you notice in this picture, there's 4 aluminum contactors.
Yeah.
Well, first off, they shouldn't be aluminum because aluminum's higher resistance than copper. Those should be copper contacts. The other thing that you'll note, and I don't recommend people do this to check it out, but I did, those aluminum plugs, or aluminum prongs, what happens is, let's say that meter's actually sideways, but it's okay. So the power comes in 2 of those contacts, goes through the meter so it can be read, and then comes out the bottom 2 contacts. Now, whether it's the top or the bottom, upside down, who cares? The point being that those aluminum contacts are actually smaller on the newer meters because they're trying to cut corners. So you get an older meter base that had a meter in for the last 50 years, the contacts will be bigger, the little prongs. So they've stretched out where they clamp, the little grippy clamp is bigger, stretched out bigger because of the bigger, things that have been plugged in there. So what happens when you go get a meter and they pull the old meter, the analog one, and replace it with a new one, there's an arcing. Okay, so that causes some degradation on the contact, not only on the meter, but also the meter base. And then they put a new meter in, so they arc it again. And then they also arc your contacts in your meter box, your meter base, again, and then they plug the meter in. So this isn't good because now they've compromised it. And if the contacts and the clamp are not a good snug fit, because the old contacts were bigger, right? That's like trying to take a bolt and you say, okay, I drilled a 1/2-inch hole. I'm going to put in a 12 millimeter hole for you guys, and they put a 10 millimeter bolt in there, right? Is it going to fit good? It'll go through, it'll work.
Yeah, but it's not going to hold.
It's not going to hold very good. So when we have current flowing through this floppy contact, it's going to try and arc across and continue the circuit. Well, that's going to degrade the contacts. That's going to cause heat.
So, in other words, it's shoddy. At the end of the day, this is just complete shoddiness.
Yeah. Now, if you create heat and you have a heat and arcing, and the circuit in the meter is made out of plastic, right? What happens if you heat up plastic? Go throw a piece of plastic in the microwave oven. Right?
It'll melt and catch
fire. It'll melt and
and
it'll catch fire. So let's go to the next slide, Richard. This happened to a guy in Toronto. That's his meter. That was his meter base. That's what happened to his house. He came home to his house on fire. You know what Toronto Hydro told him? Well, you should have upgraded your power system. I got a better idea. If you guys knew his power system was old and you're going to try and blame that on his power system, then why did you do the upgrade?
Yeah.
Right? It's not up to him. You guys are the ones that messed with his meter. And
And
this thing
forcing
caught his
him.
house on fire. And
Yeah.
they told him it was going to cost him, I think it was $5,000 to repair the mistake. And I told the guy, that's BS. You guys did this by replacing it. Now, there's
Right.
in the book that I referenced earlier, there's all kinds of information about these smart meters catching fire. And I wrote a letter to the Saskatchewan government several years ago, and I said these things are known to cause house fires because of these, you know, smaller contacts and one thing. And they actually stopped at that time. Stopped. They said we're not going to put in these smart meters until we do an investigation.
Oh, right. Well done, you then.
Yeah. So you can maybe now they're all replaced. I don't know. I don't keep chasing it, right?
No.
But just to show you that yes, smart meters do cause a fire.
Gosh. Just like EV cars.
Well, yeah, that's another whole mess.
That's not.
I have a friend of mine that's a firefighter, and I asked him, I said, what do you guys do? He said, if it's an electric car, we leave it because we're not going to go there and have the thing explode on us.
Yeah. Nightmare. Absolute nightmare. Look at that.
Yeah. That's only one. I could have gave you 30 or 40 of them.
Yeah.
Now, Richard, if you, I can't do this from here, but if you read that, look what it says up on top. What's that, NHS?
National Library of Medicine.
Yeah, no, read what it said, just the headline.
Just the headline there says distance and risk measures for the analysis of spatial data, a study of childhood cancers.
Right. And so what they're talking about is children that are exposed to RF. And what's coming off the smart meter, what's coming off your cell phone, right? And if you just what I would do is take those slides and just give them you get you to prepare them, and you can give them the slides to people. They can read through it. The problem is that I'm trying to condense so much stuff down to a little screen, right?
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, no, of course.
And I'm trying to show you that this is a source. This isn't my opinion, right? This isn't Stan's opinion, for crying out loud. It comes from PubMed, which is recognized. So if you want to do a document, and I didn't use this one, but you can cite this in a document that you're preparing for somebody.
Yeah,
okay?
the statistical, I can't quite read it on my screen at the moment, but it's because it's some distance from me and these LED lights are messing up with my one eye.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what you're saying is there's these distance and risk measurements for the analysis for in terms of children's and cancers. Well, even the fact that there is any distance which could suggest. So in other words, if you've got a smart meter in your house, what you're really saying is there is a chance of some nasty effects for your kids as well as for others, really.
Yeah. Now, can you bring that slide back, Richard? I blew up my screen. I figured out a way to do it. This approach was used to, what there was in San Francisco, 1973 to 88, there was a tower. This was long before, of course, cell phones and stuff. Now, it says right there was a thing in San Francisco, and they had this tower, and this tower was transmitting radio, television. Okay, back then that's what we had. And it said anybody within a certain distance of this thing, children had leukemia, 51 cases, brain cancer, 35, lymphatic cancer, 37 cases among individuals less than 21 years of age. Okay, and it was because of this thing called, and write this guy down, guys, Sutros Tower. So the Sutros Tower study is this exact study. So this proves that even back then, with lower frequencies than we're exposed to today, it was causing a problem. So I ask you, do you think having a higher frequency and more bombardment? Today, because we have cell phone technology and that, people are exposed to 18 quadrillion times more RF now than they were back, previously. 18 quadrillion, for those guys that can't write that down. Just put 18 down and then put 18 zeros after it.
My God. Now, I know you've got a link, haven't you, to a video that you made?
Actually, I didn't make it. That was a C-SPAN congressional hearing. And it shows right there that the cell manufacturers know that cell phones cause the problem. And they say, if you read their manual in fine print, you're supposed to hold a cell phone 1 inch away from you. Okay? And some people say, yeah, well, that's okay. I only use it once or twice a day. A lot of women take that cell phone and they put it down their bra to hang on to it. some guy shove it down their pants, whatever. That cell phone is talking to the cell tower 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That video is available on my YouTube channel. You can see the little name down there. And so you can download that. I put that up over 12 years ago.
12 years ago, yeah, it says over there, 12 years ago, and this report was saying how dangerous it was.
Yeah,
I'll leave the link in the description.
Yeah, and the FCC knows about it. Now, for those of you that want to do a fight, okay, there is a way to do it. And I'll cover that when we get to the end of this presentation. Now, Richard has a map, and it has all the cell towers in the UK, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I could have given you a map for the entire freaking world if I wanted to. But the thing is, we don't necessarily need to know where all the cell towers are, right?
No. So I was just trying to see if I could find it.
Who is the cell tower, like who's using the cell tower. And you're going to find out that in the UK, there's what, 5 or 6 telecom companies?
Yep.
So what you need to do is to do a FOIA request. Okay, FOIA, Freedom of Information Act.
Yeah.
And what you do is you find out where these cell towers are, maybe, or ask them, you say you want the safety assessment studies for, the cell tower in your area. You write to city council. And you're going to find out, guess what, people? They don't exist. Now, the telecom companies in the United States went to court. FCC, right? The Federal Communications Commission, that regulate all of the cell towers. They were at the court, and they said in the court, they said, you have to do a safety assessment study to verify that these things aren't harmful. And the FCC said, we don't like that answer, so they appealed it to a higher court. The higher court came back, said, you have to do the safety assessment study to verify that these cell towers are safe. Okay? Again, they didn't like it. They went the third time into court, and again, judge said, you still have to do that safety assessment study. Those safety assessment studies have never been done, people. Never been done. Okay? Which means there is no safety assessment study. Now, when anything is built, or, electrically, or even commercially, like a vehicle or whatever, it has to undergo safety studies to verify that what they're putting out on the market is in fact not some sort of a death trap. Well, if these cell towers have never been proven to be safe, and that Sutro Tower study from God knows when, way back when, were harmful then what's the problem? The problem is these things were never there, they should never be there, and they were never safe to begin with. And there have been people around the world actually cut these towers down.
Yes. I've had the lady from the Radiation Trust on the show about 4 months ago now. Okay. And she wrote an open letter to the government, and she said she was asking for the safety assessments and stuff. But also she was saying who is liable for these. Well, actually, this is to. Was this? Yeah, this. I think this is the smart meters. Who's liable for it? And it turns out nobody's liable.
Somebody's got to be liable.
Well, somebody's got to be liable. And the government were going, well, it's the utility companies. Now, I may have got that wrong. I may have got mixed up with the 5G, because the 5G is another bloody problem. But I think it was to do with smart meters, if I remember rightly, because she was on the channel and we were talking about it. But somebody doesn't seem to be liable for taking the liability, not the government, who are forcing people to do this, or the utility companies who are carrying out the government's demands. And somebody's got to be liable, because if somebody dies or has brain tumor or whatever, who are they going to sue?
Yeah, I would go after the metering utility, right? The billing authority. Now, the way they got around this, because you mentioned it, they say that meter is not technically an electric device. They call it a metering device. And because it's a metering device, it doesn't have to conform to the safety standard. That's the shenanigans they pull.
But it's got electricity in it.
Yeah. So who installed it? And whoever installed it, being the building authority, is now exposing you to RF exposure, which, based on what we've covered today and the book and the documents and everything, prove that that's not correct. It's not good. So you can say, you guys installed this, therefore you guys are directly or indirectly committing assault. I want that meter replaced with a non-transmitting meter. And this is where people got ticked off, and they said, okay, we're just going to replace it ourselves.
Yeah, and I'm not at all surprised. So there you go. There's that. And just
Yeah.
to end on this is your contact information. I'll put the links in the description. Anyway.
Yep. And that Smart Meter Litigation Group is free. Download the documents, do whatever you want with them. And there's another one on geoengineering, and I put similar documents, not as good, but similar documents. And if anybody has questions, my email contacts are there. But there was actually another screen, Richard. I think it may come up after this, or maybe it didn't go through. But anyway, what you'll notice on one of the other slides, I'm not quite sure why it's not with you, but if you go to the cell tower places where it is, it shows where the cell tower says, when they're going to install it, it says health risk, cell tower installation site. Well, okay, so they're admitting it's a health risk. And the other thing is that they also claim that the transmissions from this area may exceed the safety limits prescribed under the rules. Well, if you live right next door to that cell tower, and the problem is they say, well, it's just like using a cell phone. But if you look at a cell tower, it's transmitting 24 hours a day, and there's probably 25 antennas on there.
Yeah.
And they're transmitting more than the little half or 3/4 or maybe 1 watt your cell tower's putting out. They're putting out 750 watts or more.
Yeah.
So there's no possible way you can claim that it's garbage safe.
You need some sort of like hazmat radiation suit to go anywhere near the bloody thing.
Yeah, so now there is people that do provide a product that blocks RF. Okay, and basically it's a conductive paint. The downside is you'd have to take your house and remove all the electrical plugs as far as the lids, and then you put the silver tape and you ground it and you paint your house, and it becomes black. It's the only color it's available. And then you'd have to repaint it with this other stuff. And what it is that the signal comes in and it tries to find its path to ground because the paint's conductive, and then it would ground itself through the RF, and then that would solve the problem. The other alternative, of course, is to build what's called a Faraday cage, and you can do that by going to, a lumber supply store. We have Home Depot here. You guys, I think, have Timber Mart, and you can build it out of an aluminum screen. And some people build a cage around it. Basically, you build a wooden structure, staple the screen to it, and then you ground it to the electrical outlet. So when the signal hits that screen, it has a path back to ground, and it doesn't go through you while you sleep.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, one of the problems when you have this RF exposure, especially while you're sleeping, your body doesn't know what to do with this because it's not designed for this. So it determines that this is daylight. Okay, it sees it as daylight. Now, when your body sees daylight, it doesn't produce melatonin. Melatonin is used to rebuild and help you sleep and whatever. So when it doesn't produce the right amount of melatonin, or maybe not at all, your body doesn't get a chance to fully recuperate, which is why a lot of people that are exposed to RF, they're always run down and tired because their body never really gets a chance to rest.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a horrible thing, right?
Well, I turn my electricity off at night time, all of it, and the Wi-Fi and everything, because of the dirty electricity. I turn it back on in the morning because the freezer is now a pool of water, of course, and I get the mop out. And no, it doesn't. It hasn't defrosted in the 8 hours that I'm asleep. So and the phones are in the different room and on airplane mode. I would turn it off. Only my particular phone is knackered because I get this green screen coming up all the time, and if I turn it off, I can't actually put the code in. So one of these days. But really and truly, I'd like to go back to the 1970s when we didn't have any of this crap.
Well, here's another issue. With a lot of the modern, even a desk phone, right?
Yeah.
The desk phone requires electricity to operate. Some of them do. And so if you have a power failure, because, I don't know, you had a fire, maybe it popped a breaker or fuse, and you go to call the fire department, your phone doesn't work. And, common sense would say get rid of that phone and put a standard phone. And you can get some of the old Northern Telecom or whatever the British Telecom phones that they have out where you are that don't require that. You need an analog phone. Go check eBay, for crying out loud. Go to the yard sale.
Yeah.
My phone doesn't have all that electronic junk, but all these ones that have amplifiers and call display and this, that, and the other thing, they all require power to operate. Go
Yes.
back to, like you said, the old phone, even if it's a rotary dial.
Yeah.
You
The
know,
old.
at least it
Well,
worked.
to get the old candlestick from the 1930s. Hello,
Yep.
hello, anybody there? Anybody? Yeah, all right, thank you. We've run over an hour. We could have a
Yep.
lot more fun, but we've run over an hour. I hope this has been helpful to everybody. As to one reason to push back against the smart meters, and don't be bullied in it, because I think you said we don't have to have them anyway, if provided that the old circular diddly do is still whizzing round.
Yeah.
We've got to change this whole situation. Become so dependent on electricity, and everything is going that way. I think what damage that is doing to everybody, it's just too much.
Yeah. And there is people that are RF sensitive, and they some. I know a lady that you can't go in her house.
Yeah,
In
and that's
fact,
awful.
when she drove her car's got some satellite uplink signal garbage, and she had to tear her entire car apart and get rid of it. Because it's debilitating to have this exposure.
Yeah, but as you said before, with the map, there's almost nowhere you can go now where you're not being radiated.
Yeah.
Listen, got to finish the show, but thank you, Stan, for coming on. We're going to get you back fairly soon with some more fascinating and interesting bits and bobs to bring to the lovely audience. But in the meantime, you are a star, and thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome, Richard. And if you would like, one of the upcoming shows will deal with the fact that you're not a person.
Oh, you're
And
not a person.
that will basically put a big crunch into the government's forcing you to pay, let's say, council tax or HMRC.
Yeah. Brilliant stuff. The one and only Stan McDonald. I'll be back with more monologues and, of course, more wonderful guests. But in the meantime, I hope that's helped. Do check out the links in the description. Stan and I will be back with more. Till then, bye-bye.